The Long Dark is an incredible game with practically infinite replayability. However, it is not easy. The game gives almost no tutorials and no guided help. But don't worry, Zach is here to give you some useful tips on surviving the Aurora winter. Let's get to it. The first tip is to always use a torch when lighting a fire. The reason for this is resource management. If you start a fire with a match and fail, you will still consume the match. Matches are a valuable resource, especially on higher difficulties, so you want to use them sparingly. Failing a fire many times will waste matches. So instead, just use one match to light a torch and then use the torch to light the fire. Should you fail, then the torch will still be lit and you can try again, and you still have only used one match. As an additional tip, when you leave the fire, you should take several torches with you, because you can throw a torch on the ground and then you can light a new torch with it. This will allow you to carry the fire further, allowing you to potentially start another campfire, still having used only one match. All caves in the Long Dark count as being outdoors, but they also have an indoor zone. This is about halfway through the cave. Here, on the inner section of the cave, you stay warm and can even cure hides or saplings. In zones like Hush River Valley, this is the only way you can actually do this, since there are no buildings in the region. You can see when you're on the indoor side of a cave because you start warming up. On lower difficulties, this is something you may not have noticed because the world is still fairly warm, especially on Pilgrim and Voyager. In this clip here, I have outlined the border between the two parts, and as I move between them, you can see how one part of the cave is cold and one is warm. Caves are a great way to combat cabin fever because even though there's an indoor zone, they still count as being outdoors. So for example, let's say your base is the camp office in Mystery Lake and you get cabin fever. Well, then you can just go to the nearby Lake Overlook cave and spend a night here, and voila, no more cabin fever. Campfires last longer if they are outdoors. This means that it's always best to do cooking and making water outside if you can. Not only will the fires last longer this way, but you'll also reduce cabin fever. And there is of course still a risk that a sudden blizzard will blow out your fire though. This is where the aforementioned caves become really handy. Because caves count as being outdoors, regardless of where in the cave you are, you can light a fire on the warm inside section of the cave, allowing you to maintain a fire and cook outdoors without risk of wind or cabin fever. Stones in the Long Dark are not just for killing rabbits, but can also be used to distract wolves. You should ideally be crouched, because then you have reduced aggro range to the wolf, and then you just throw the stone somewhere near it and it will head in that direction to investigate. This will only work if the wolf has not already spotted you. You can also use this method to lure a wolf towards a deer, or you can scare off a deer towards a wolf. This can be useful if you don't have a weapon in the early game. You could just let the wolf hunt the deer for you. After the wolf has killed the deer, you just approach the wolf until it starts growling at you, and then you just aim at it with your stone or whatever weapon you have, and it will always run away. This next tip might seem obvious to experienced players, but you'd be surprised how many people may not know you could do this. Namely, that you can rest on ledges when climbing ropes. All but the shortest rope climbs have at least one ledge somewhere up the rope. Use these to take a break and recover stamina, then continue the climb. The recent addition of crampons in Ash Canyon reduces stamina loss when climbing, but I would still highly recommend that you use these ledges on long rope climbs. The best way to recover health is sleep. Generally speaking, you recover 1% health every hour as long as your meters are full when you are awake and walking about. However, when sleeping, you activate multipliers that increase over time and allows you to recover additional health. How much you recover depends on how long you sleep, what difficulty you're on, and what kind of bed you sleep in. For example, if you sleep in a bed on Interloper, then for the first 2 hours of your sleep, you only recover 1% per hour, so the same as when you're awake. However, if you sleep 8 hours or more, you start gaining 5% health per hour. You can see the full scale here on the left. On lower difficulties, you can recover as much as 90% of your health by sleeping a full 12 hours. So if you get attacked by a bear and that left you badly beaten, don't worry about it, just go to bed. A full night's sleep will fix it right up. Drinking a herbal tea will also give you an additional recovery, and birch tea will help do the same. Just a little side note before we move on to the next tip. If you are playing an Interloper, you should not sleep more than 10 hours. This is because after 10 hours you become dehydrated and now you start losing health. So an Interloper, don't oversleep. The flare gun is perhaps the most powerful weapon in the game. For one thing, every animal in the game runs away from its flare, but you can also use this weapon for hunting. In fact, if you hit a bear in the head with the flare gun, you will one-shot it, as seen in this clip. In order to do this, you need to wait for the bear to charge, then crouch, and wait for the bear as close as possible. If you are lucky, you'll hit it in the head and it will go down with one hit. But the good thing is, even if you miss, the bear will be afraid and run off, so you're not really in any danger doing this. In the early game, this can be incredibly useful since you may not have a bow or a rifle, and therefore it's a good way to get early bear kills. Just a little note, the flare gun can instant kill any animal, not just a bear. It also works on wolves, on moose, and you can even use it on deer if you can actually hit them. Only rabbits are actually immune to the flare gun, but why would you hunt the rabbit with them anyway? When you go hunting, you might feel some pressure towards hitting every shot with your weapon and bringing down your prey. However, you don't really need to do this. As long as you cause an animal to bleed, it will eventually die. Therefore, regardless of whether you are hunting a deer or a bear, all you really need is one shot. Once the animal is hit and starts running off, you can check the ground to see if it is bleeding. Usually, there will also be a blood spray when you hit the animal. You can, of course, from this point track the animal using the blood spatters and prints on the ground, but instead what you could do is just pass time and wait a couple of hours for the animal to bleed out. After this period, the animal will be somewhere in the area dead, and you can just go out and listen for crows. The crows will lead you to the carcass, and you can now harvest it, and all it took was one shot. One little side note about this tip, the moose is the only animal in the game that do not bleed out. So here I'm afraid you're going to have to bring it down with multiple shots. Unless you get a lucky critical hit.
What? A one-shot kill? It's a Christmas miracle! Holy
When you have gathered meat, you should store it outside. This is because the snow acts as a fridge and the food will deteriorate slower. You can safely leave the food outside your base for a month without it going off. And this is actually key to surviving a long run, because then you have a reliant food supply to return to. If you're level 5 cooking, you can leave the food outside indefinitely, and you can eat it even if it is 0% condition. This is because level 5 cooking makes you immune to food poisoning, meaning even ruined meat is safe. Note that this also applies to raw meat. Raw meat will deteriorate faster than cooked meat, but it will not despawn. If the meat is ruined and at 0%, you can still cook it and it will add 50% condition to the meat. But don't ever eat raw meat, you will still get food poisoning even if you are cooking level 5. Finally, I have a general tip for all you survivors. do not go out at night. Dark walk will be damned. If you plan to survive, always avoid going outside in the dark. There are many reasons for this. First, your visibility is obviously reduced in the dark, and it is so much easier to get lost. Second, the wolves act a bit differently at night. Normally, if a wolf spots you, he will start barking and then stalk you like this. In other words, you can hear the wolf approaching you and being near you. However, I have experienced that wolves at night won't make this sound when they approach you from behind, which can lead you to be ambushed by wolves you didn't even know were there. Going out during the aurora is even worse. Tricks that work on regular wolves will usually not work on aurora wolves, and they are not afraid of fires or flares. Aurora animals also have a larger detection range and are more persistent in their attacks, so unless you absolutely have to, do not go gentle into that night. And that's it for this video. There are plenty more tips that I could have included, but these were the top 10 that I could think of. If you like this sort of content, leave a like and subscribe for more of it. This video is part of an upcoming series, and I'll be posting another video about tips on surviving interlopers soon, as well as a video about hidden loot and some mechanics about the game that you may not know about. Thank you to Kimiota and Barbecue Chicken for their footage in this video, and thank you to Guntech1, Ones and Only, Kimiota and Athenan for content feedback and advice. Stay safe out there, survivors.